Have you ever wondered, where exactly is heaven? Is it some distant ethereal realm where only spirits exist? Or could it possibly be a physical place, just as real as the ground we're standing on? What will happen to our bodies? Will we be spirits floating? Do we have physical bodies in heaven? Are there any characters mentioned in the Bible who unveiled these mysteries? Continuing with episode 4 of our series on heaven, we'll explore the possibility that the present heaven is not only real in a spiritual sense, but could also be just as physical as Earth itself. I invite you to challenge your assumptions and look at what Scripture really says. If you haven't seen the previous episodes, go back and watch them. Otherwise, stay tuned, because this could change the way you think about eternity. Now, these questions have been debated among theologians, missionaries, and believers for centuries. And for many, the idea that heaven could be a physical place feels, well, almost sacrilegious. Some people are troubled by the idea that suggests heaven might be a physical place. For them, heaven had always been purely spiritual, and to suggest otherwise feels like heresy. One can point to numerous scriptures, but no matter what is being shared, their belief remains firm based on the assumption that heaven is spirit because God is spirit, John 4:24. But here's where we need to pause. Does saying that God is spirit automatically mean that heaven must be spiritual too? Heaven, after all, isn't God. It's a place that God created, and while God chooses to dwell there, he doesn't need a place like we do. As finite human beings, spiritual and physical by nature, don't we require a place that's adapted to our existence? When we think about heaven, it's easy to fall into the trap of assuming that spiritual and physical realms must be opposites. This belief has deeply influenced how many Christians view heaven. It's the idea that physical things, our bodies, the earth, are inferior, while spiritual things, our souls, heaven, are superior. This stems from Greek philosophy, particularly Plato, who taught that material things are evil, while immaterial things are pure. Unfortunately, this idea has crept into Christian thought, leading us to view heaven as a disembodied, purely spiritual realm. But when we dive into Scripture, we see something very different. In fact, we see hints that the present heaven could be very much physical. Let's take a look at the book of Hebrews. It says that earthly priests serve at a sanctuary that is a copy and shadow of what is in heaven. Hebrews 8:5. Think about that for a moment. If the earthly sanctuary, the temple, is a physical copy, could the heavenly one be physical as well? We also read in Revelation of the temple in heaven that is filled with smoke from the glory of God and martyrs wearing clothes, and even people holding palm branches in their hands, Revelation 7:9. We also read that there are horses in heaven, 2 Kings 2:11, Revelation 19:14, and even musical instruments, Revelation 8:6. Could all of these just be symbolic? Or are we seeing literal descriptions of a very real, tangible place? The book of Revelation isn't the only scripture hinting at a physical heaven. The idea that earth is patterned after heaven is reinforced in Hebrews 9:24, where it says Christ didn't enter a man-made sanctuary but went into heaven itself. It's almost as if heaven is the original and earth is the copy. And if the copy is physical, doesn't it suggest the original might be as well? Jesus himself gives us a clue. On the cross, he tells the repentant thief, "Today you will be with me in paradise." Luke 23:43. Paradise ultimately comes from an Iranian word that the Greeks modified into paradisos, meaning enclosed park. In Hellenistic Greek, paradisos was also used in an early Greek translation of Jewish scriptures in reference to the Garden of Eden. And where is Eden now? Revelation tells us that the tree of life, once located in Eden, is now in the present heaven, Revelation 2:7. If Eden was physical, why wouldn't it still be physical? Could heaven not also be a physical paradise? Let's dig deeper. God, in his omnipresence, transcends the limitations of both the spiritual and physical realms. While he is spirit, he is also capable of manifesting himself in physical form. We see this throughout the Old Testament, where God appears to Abraham, Moses, and others in tangible ways. Consider the burning bush that was not consumed, or the pillar of fire that guided the Israelites. These physical manifestations demonstrate God's ability to interact with the physical realm without diminishing his spiritual essence. If God, in his divine nature, can exist in both spiritual and physical forms, is it not conceivable that heaven, his dwelling place, could also encompass both realms? What about our physical bodies? Have you ever wondered what happens to our bodies when we die? Will we exist as pure spirits in heaven, or is there a possibility that we might have physical bodies? Humans are both spiritual and physical, unlike angels and God, who are spiritual beings. When God created Adam, he didn't make him a spirit and then place him inside a body. No, God first created the body and then he breathed life into it, Genesis 2:7. We've never existed as purely spiritual beings, so why would we assume that in heaven we suddenly will? In fact, Scripture seems to suggest that we might have intermediate bodies while we await our final resurrection bodies. The Apostle Paul talks about our longing to be clothed with our heavenly dwelling, 2 Corinthians 5:2-3. This could be pointing to a temporary physical form in heaven, a bridge between our current bodies and the ones we will have in the new earth. What if I told you there are stories in the Bible that suggest some people have been taken to heaven in their physical form right now? Let's dive into some of the most fascinating examples: Enoch, Elijah, Moses, and even the rich man and Lazarus. We'll explore whether these figures hold the key to understanding if we'll have physical bodies in heaven long before the final resurrection. Let's start with Enoch and Elijah. These two figures stand out because, according to Scripture, they were taken to heaven without experiencing death. Enoch, we read in Genesis 5:24, walked with God, then he was no more because God took him. Hebrews 11:5 confirms that Enoch didn't experience death. In a similar fashion, Elijah is said to have been taken up to heaven in a whirlwind right before the eyes of his apprentice Elisha, 2 Kings 2:11. No bodies were left behind. Now, let's think about that for a moment. If Enoch and Elijah didn't die, does that mean their physical bodies were taken to heaven? How could mortal, cursed bodies exist in heaven? It's a mystery, but perhaps it's a glimpse into how God can extend his grace to allow certain individuals to bypass death and enter the present heaven in a physical form. But let's not stop there. There's another fascinating account that points to this possibility. Remember the transfiguration of Jesus when he took Peter, James, and John up the mountain? They saw something incredible. Jesus in his glory talking to none other than Moses and Elijah, Luke 9:28-36. Now, here's the question. If Moses and Elijah were already in heaven, how did they appear physically? Was it a temporary body, just for that moment? Or were they embodying some form that they already possessed in heaven? It's possible that God, in his infinite power, can create temporary bodies for people to inhabit when they return to earth. Or perhaps they were in a physical state in heaven all along. Either way, the Transfiguration shows us that heaven is not just a vague spiritual realm. There's a physical element to it, at least in some cases. Now let's turn to another story, the parable of the rich man and Lazarus in Luke 16. This story is often considered a window into the realities of the afterlife. When both the rich man and Lazarus die, we see something unusual. They both retain physical traits. The rich man is tormented by fire and thirst, and he begs for Lazarus to dip the tip of his finger in water to cool his tongue. What's striking here is that Jesus describes the afterlife with physical details: fire, thirst, fingers, tongues. Could this suggest that we have some form of physical body in the present heaven and hell? While many interpret these details as figurative, it's possible that they point to a more physical existence in the afterlife than we might think. A strictly literal interpretation of this passage presents challenges, as it suggests things that are improbable and not supported elsewhere, such as the idea that people in heaven and hell can communicate with each other. On the other hand, a purely figurative approach leaves us unsure of what, if anything, to take seriously. If no concrete conclusions can be drawn from the story, what is the purpose of all its details? Perhaps a balanced perspective is more fitting, one that doesn't demand every element to be taken literally, but acknowledges that Jesus intended us to view people in the afterlife as actual individuals with thoughts, abilities, and possibly forms. These individuals retain their identity, memories, and awareness from their earthly lives and relationships. Jesus likely wanted us to understand both heaven and hell as real places populated by real people who once lived on earth. Each of these concepts is supported by other biblical teachings, though none are presented as vividly as they are here. In the intermediate state of heaven or hell, we await the moment Jesus described, when all who are in their graves will hear his voice and come out. Those who have done good will rise to live, and those who have done evil will rise to be condemned. John 5:28-29. Until that day, Scripture tells us that those who die will enter a real place, either the present heaven or present hell, where they will exist as conscious beings, carrying with them the memories of their lives and relationships on earth. Those in hell will endure suffering, hopelessness, and apparent isolation, while those in heaven will experience comfort, joy, and deep relationships with God and others. So, what can we conclude from these fascinating accounts? First, Enoch and Elijah may have been taken to heaven in their physical bodies, a mystery that challenges our understanding of what's possible in the present heaven. Second, Moses and Elijah's appearance at the Transfiguration shows us that God can give physical forms to those in heaven, at least temporarily. Finally, the story of the rich man and Lazarus suggests that we might retain physical aspects in the afterlife, even before the final resurrection. Is it possible, then, that those in the present heaven have some kind of intermediate physical form? It's certainly something to think about, especially as we try to understand what awaits us after death and before the resurrection. What we know for sure is that God has the power to transcend our expectations, and heaven may be more tangible, more real than we often imagine. Heaven is a place filled with wonder, mystery, and unimaginable grace. It's easy to get lost in the details, but the heart of the matter is this. Jesus Christ has made a way for us to be with him for eternity, and one thing is certain, heaven will be glorious beyond anything we can imagine. In episode 5, we will answer what is life like in the present heaven. Be sure to subscribe to this channel for more videos in this series as we continue to explore the incredible realities of heaven. Do you think we'll have physical bodies in heaven? Drop a comment below and let's talk about it. God bless.